Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the COTS Review Special and the start of Season 6 of GameSense. I'm Evan Morrison. I'm here with some awesome members of RoboSports Network and a special guest tonight. Before we get started, I really want to thank our sponsor, Symbotic, for providing us the means to do what we do, all the cool shows that we do here on Twitch, both the weekly shows and the live events. Shout out to Francis, who's directing behind the scenes. We also got Steve and Matt here from RoboSports Network, and Allen Gregory joining us today from Spectrum. Allen, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You like what we're doing? Don't forget to sub to our channel. You'll get notifications whenever we go live. We do episodes pretty much every week throughout the competition season, and we just like to talk about robots. If you have any questions that you want us to talk about, answer while we're live today, don't forget to do !Q in the chat, and we'll take those periodically throughout the show as they come up. And before we get started, a disclaimer specifically for this show that we do have several members of RoboSports Network who are employees and or distributors of FRC suppliers, and many others of us who have ties through sponsorship or have been involved in beta testing. This episode is not sponsored by any FRC suppliers, and in the interest of avoiding obvious conflict of interest, we don't have any employees or distributors on the show tonight live, and we'll make every effort to make fair evaluations of the product, but it's a review show. We have opinions and we're going to be sharing them. However, we don't take ourselves too seriously. You shouldn't either. Have fun, and if you don't like what we say, go out and prove us wrong. We're going to start off tonight by taking a review of who's reported in so far from the main suppliers and a couple of new ones popping up. Andy Mark launched their winter product line last week. Vex just came out with their stuff today. They also launched some stuff back earlier in the year, right before FTC kickoff, and we'll be talking about the FRC applications of those tonight. Armabot has a suite of new products and brand new to the market Swerve Drive specialties from the Pacific Northwest with some pretty cool Swerve Drive modules that we'll be talking about, and some big news from not too long ago. Brand new motor and motor style, the brushless Rev Neo from Rev Robotics and the associated Spark Max speed controller. We're still waiting on some peripherals from Rev that they've hinted at, possibly some new products from West Coast Products. And we have confirmed that the Limelight is coming with an update soon as well. So we haven't got the whole suite, but we got most of them, and we're pretty excited to talk about it tonight. Matt, I'm going to kick it over to you and get your thoughts on some of the new compliant wheels that have come out, because, boy, there are a lot of options.
Yeah, it's funny. We were joking before the show started that it's almost getting to the point where it's hard to remember who has what and how many different options there are. And I mean, that's part of the reason we're doing the show, right? Like, it's really neat to see that teams really can really hone in their skills on what exactly they need these wheels to do for whatever the game application is. So it's neat that if you have a few of them around of each type, you can just quickly swap them in and out to try out something in a prototype or on your real robot and to give it a try. So I'm excited to see how these different wheels work out. The videos of the prototypes that we've seen so far, it's pretty impressive, pretty cool what they can do.
For sure, yeah. Alan, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at a lot of the options, but there's some differences between what we've seen out of Vex and what we've seen out of Andy Mark on the compliant wheels.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had some of the Andy Mark compliant wheels last season, right? You had the 2-inch and 4-inch in the half-inch hex bore already. Vex in August released the 1.625 all the way to 4-inch flex wheels that had half-inch hex in the lower end, but then they had the bearing bore-ish 1-inch diameter bore that you can put a hub into, or you could stretch over a roller. So it gives you a little bit more options there that are different than the ones that Andy Mark has.
Yeah, I think kind of what we're really seeing is, Andy Mark's honed in on the bonded cores. You don't need to do anything else. You buy the wheel, you slap a shaft through it, you're good to go. Vex has brought a little bit more flexibility to the setup. You have to add the hubs to it, or put the rollers on, put it over a roller shaft or whatever. But some more options there. Different durometer options as well from both the low end 35A durometer and at the high end up to 60. So a lot of great squish there. Anybody?
Yeah, when they came out, it was pretty obvious in the game we just had this last year, Power Up, where I think they put, was it 2 of the wheels in the kit, and then you saw a lot of teams trying just that type out, and there were only a few types that you could really pick from, and a lot of teams found that type worked well. And now with all these different options, it's neat because you can start with that, but know that you have so many different types coming out that you can try out if it doesn't quite work exactly how you want it.
Yeah, exactly. Last year, basically, we had the 2-inch and 1.625 options from Andy Mark, and then and the 1.625 from Vex and West Coast Products, and the 4-inch version from Andy Mark, and that was kind of it. And now we've got a bunch in the middle to kind of fill it out. A lot of different options there.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool.
And it also makes it so it's harder to justify the use of the Fairline rollers now. So you're hopefully not spending $35 per wheel anymore, like we did in our intake last year, because we have a lot more options in colors and anything else that you want to make your robot look right.
But it also with the increase in number of different diameters, you no longer have to do like weird like bad gearings or running your motors at a speed that you don't necessarily want them to be running at. You can just design and pick your gearbox for the actual size that you need. I know our intake, we ended up having to run it at like half speed because, I mean, we didn't go out and buy the right, necessarily the right wheels, but running with the wheels that we had, we couldn't get to the correct size. So there you are with a gearbox optimized for nothing.
Yeah, definitely a lot of room for optimization. Also, I think it is interesting to note, some teams did try and use these as shooter wheels in Steamworks, but they were very popular with the hard game pieces, both the gears and then last year's power cubes. It'll be really interesting to see if they catch on with maybe squishy game pieces. We don't know what we're going to get out of deep space, but they've traditionally been really, really useful when you've got those hard game pieces and you need your intake itself to have a little bit of give or your shooter. So
yeah,
pretty excited about those options.
Sorry, Evan. I'm interested to see the bigger diameter wheels where you're actually in sizes that are actual drive wheel size. Like it'll be interesting to see what teams end up using. I'm not trying to insinuate that they'd make good drive wheels because I really don't know, but it'd be interesting to see like what do you need that big a diameter wheel for besides drive wheels? It'll be interesting.
So some of it is for the FTC market. So we've already seen some teams using the 4-inch compliance or the 4-inch flex wheels from Vex and some of the compliant wheels as FTC drive wheels this year. I doubt any supplier is going to rate them for FRC drivetrain loads. You're putting 50, 60 pounds on there. I don't think that's what they're designed for. But yeah, for all the shooting tasks and things. And the 5-inch wheels, teams use them this year. That's why they produced them, right? We had 148 and other teams using the 5-inch, what they were calling space wheels.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not necessarily incorrect to think of parts of the driving surface on the field as a game object. So yeah, you collect it with your drivetrain. So maybe it's
hopefully not too much.
Like 2016, it was at 100%. You were thinking about it like you were going to collect this part of what you were driving over.
I can tell you from personal experience, the FTAs don't like it when you collect the carpet. They get very mad at you.
Yeah, no, but I definitely had the same thought. We've seen the last couple years teams being really successful with this sort of super small, super lightweight, very highly specialized robots. And even though they're not rated for it, there's a possibility that somebody could get away with a 60-pound, 70-pound robot running on 4-inch or 5-inch wheels like this, and if you're looking at it like that and you're trying to get the compliance out of the wheels, and you're trying to save weight on a robot like that, it's certainly a lighter weight option than going with pneumatic tires. So not something that I think any of us are recommending, but I would certainly love to see somebody do it, just to have somebody else be the guinea pig for testing that.
I mean, all you have to do is swap out all of your wheels every single match. If you're a regional team, you can probably get away with it.
Yeah,
You got like 10
wheels,
matches there, 10 matches of championships. Come on, it's not that much. Just make a
Seven-
4-wheel drive robot.
$7-8 a wheel. It's not terrible.
I mean,
Well, and the other thing we've seen before is teams take these wheels and then they cut some of the wedge parts out.
Mhm.
So now you have options where you can also have, with a higher diameter, it's stiffer, right? So you have that cut out, but you're getting some different options on what you can do while making it not perfectly circular too. So it's really amazing how many different options you have to do one task or multiple.
yeah, you can cut them up and make them into little flappy wheels or something. So definitely excited to see what teams do with this. I'm excited to see what we'll do with it. I know last year on Apex, we custom molded silicone rollers on top of the plastic Versa rollers to make a really robust roller, because it was basically the front edge of our robot and we were going to be running into things with it. And that was a lot of work. And now you can literally buy 1-inch wide slices of compliant wheels and stack them up on top of that roller, and there you go. Not sure that we necessarily would have done it last year, but it's certainly something that I would have looked into, to see if we could get away without doing custom molding. Moving on, in the wheels department, Andy Mark also released earlier, not with their winter product launch, but 2-inch Omni wheels option that have 2 bore options. I believe it's 1/2-inch hex and 3/8-inch hex.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool. That's, those little wheels have been used all over for various things.
Yeah, if you get those added into an intake, if you have to do a centering device, that type of thing, it helps a lot to be able to do that.
I mean, they're also really similar. I think, this size Omni wheel kind of broke into the market in like 2014 when 118 and a few other teams put those little tiny red Omni wheels on their drivetrain as drop down, anti friction pin. Yeah. And so this is now really similar to those 48 millimeters. These are about 50 millimeters, but instead of having a dead axle, you can actually drive them with a live axle. So those are pretty cool too. I'm excited about those.
I guess my question would be, and probably better for Alan, because I know, Alan, you have a history with, I'm thinking of, what was the game with the massive exercise ball in the recent past?
2014, yeah.
Yeah, 2014, where you had the mechanism wheels that were spinning horizontally to intake those. Like, what applications do you see for such a small Omni wheel?
Yeah, so anywhere where you're having that center device, so in the middle of any intake where you're trying to center the object, not having that lateral friction helps be allowed to center it and slide it that way so you can bring it into your robot. So even if you watch the Andy Mark reveal, they had that little robot picking up fuel, and they used the tiny Omni wheels to slide that, to allow it to slide into the center, and they could still intake it. We're still waiting for somebody to release the 2-inch mechanism though, so that'll happen at some point.
we know teams have adapted those. There isn't one from a main FRC supplier that's just COTS, but I suspect that you'll see these used in combination with some of the 2-inch mechanism wheels on intakes, if it makes sense at all this year. We saw teams trying to use them with Steamworks fuel for the real game, not just Andy Mark's little development robot. I have to say, personally, I'm a little disappointed in the color options on this one. I love the red ones that you got from Rotocaster, and they didn't replicate that, so we'll have to make do with gray. Well, I think it's probably time to talk about the big news from probably all of the product launches, the new motor options. So, Alan, I think you've been involved in actually some of the beta testing with the Rev Neo and the Spark Max. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit
Sure.
about what they are and what we can expect, and what your thoughts are on having played with them?
Sure, absolutely. So this is kind of the brushless revolution that we were all kind of hoping for last year that we didn't get. So this is the second brushless motor to be introduced into FRC. It's by a FRC supplier, so it was more specifically designed for what we needed to do and the way we play and the advantages that you can get from brushless in an FRC robot. It's still, even though it's been released, even though I even have it in my hands and I have it back on a demo robot back there. We still don't know a lot about it yet, right? We're still waiting on motor curves. We're still waiting on the CAN libraries to be able to do a lot with the Spark Maxes. So there's still a lot we don't know, but it has the potential to be awesome. We're very excited about the drivetrain applications, being able to cut 6 pounds out of our drivetrain from last year just by swapping the motors and getting more power. That's a huge deal. There is a pretty big cost associated with, though, for teams that are thinking about switching. It's not necessarily worth it for everybody to be the guinea pig. It is going to be a big expense, but they could be a pretty big revolution that hopefully we'll see more products and more competition in this market to get more brushless into FRC.
Yeah, I mean, I think the initial tests have really spoken for themselves. That we've seen a few videos from some of the beta teams, and that the power is there, the weight is there, and even if the Spark Max as a controller doesn't have all the features that we've come to expect from the modern FRC controllers for this first year, I have no doubts that it's going to be a game changer going forward. One thing that I personally really want to highlight about this, Apex Robotics, my team has gotten a chance to play with them too as part of the beta test, and we've had them running on our ARM from last season. We took our practice robot and retrofitted the motors onto that, and they've performed pretty fantastic. But the really cool thing that the Spark Max can do that no other speed controller can do right now is run off of USB, and so we've been controlling the ARM just through the laptop interface. And on that robot, it's plugged into the PDP, but you could plug this directly into a battery, control it with your laptop, and run a motor however you want. It uses the built-in encoder on the Neo to run either straight proportional velocity, or it can run, percent voltage, right? Percent speed. It can run a velocity profile for you, pick a velocity, and it'll hold it there, and it can actually do position. And so we slapped this on our old robot and literally moved the slider and controlled our ARM with what seemed like a pretty well-tuned PID loop, just no programming whatsoever. So from a prototyping standpoint, that's super awesome to be able to plug this motor into a speed controller, plug it into a laptop, plug it into a battery, and control an ARM or set a shooter wheel speed. So I'm really excited for the possibilities that opens up, notwithstanding any of the other advanced features for control on robots. Steve, and Matt, do you guys have any? Yeah, sorry, have your thoughts on this?
I'm really excited about we're starting to see sort of COTS electrical solutions. For it was like just before I joined, nobody made any gearboxes. So up until now, almost all the developments have been in mechanical. Just no longer do you have to successfully manufacture a properly made gearbox. You can kind of skip over that part of development. And now skipping over parts of electronic development might help a lot of teams get to, well, now our autonomous just works because we've actually moved the ARM before bag day or before our competition, because you can skip a couple of the steps.
Yeah, I really think that feature is going to be huge. You bring up a good point that for prototyping it's helpful, but also just for doing basic functional validation of the robot without needing to, you know, make sure all the code works with no bugs is pretty neat too.
And
So
and for debugging stuff or just checking a system, you don't have to pull up the whole robot. You can plug in straight in. Even when it's mounted to your real robot, you'll be able to test systems quickly on the real robot.
Yep.
The other big thing that I think is almost overlooked because of how important the motor is the motor controller. The Spark Max gets our first real competition to the Talon SRX that we've all been using for a long time. But now we have two competitors. They should be driving more features, hopefully drive price down a little bit. We already see the Spark Max being a little bit cheaper than the SRX. So you should be getting more and more stuff and making teams be able to use it and perform better on the field and inspire more students.
What's been cool that I've seen from an outside perspective is just seeing the release and seeing what people have started to do with it is that these motors can really fit anywhere. Like it blows my mind that some of the pictures I've seen on Chief Delphi of where these can go is just really cool. One of the pictures that I think we're pulling up is like it can fit in line in the current AM14U3 drivetrain. Like you could put them there if you wanted to. Now, whether that's a good idea or not, who knows? But you could make a lot more space in other places where in the past that space was just real estate gone for motors and gearboxes. So it's really neat that you could really see a change in robot drivetrain design just because you can make so much more room for other things now. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, for sure. I think you know, I think everybody's looking at what the motor has to offer, and it's pretty much only upside from what we've seen so far, and we're just going to try and close the loop, so to speak, in terms of where the features on the speed controller end up, because there hasn't been a whole lot of word out of Rev in terms of what we can what we're going to see at kickoff. So I'm hopeful, I'm excited, and I think we're going to see some pretty awesome designs out of this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're getting a 6 Neo drive is more power that you can actually put to the ground than we've ever been able to, just because of how much more efficient they should be.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be really cool. Moving on a little bit, though, we had another motor that was announced as an update, the Redline A, from Andy Mark, with a little bit more top speed and a little bit more power that they're advertising out of what's essentially the same Redline 775 that they had. How do you guys think that this is going to factor into teams' decisions this year?
So yeah, I mean, if it does end up being some sort of shooting game or something where you need a little bit more power on each wheel as you're accelerating something, so I can see it's been useful in like 2013 as you're trying to get that disc going so fast, and we had like a lot of small wheels spinning really, really quickly. But even just a 775 Pro already would have been, or the Redline would have been huge improvement already. But if you just need that little extra, it helps out.
Do you guys think that teams are going to make kind of a whole scale conversion over to the Redline A if they were already using either the regular Redline or 775 Pros, or is it kind of going to be a as you need it if it fits the application to go for it?
I think it might be interesting if there are climbers again, because climbing's kind of a common theme. Like last year, there were or 2018, there were quite a few teams running 4 775 Pros into even a 2-speed gearbox for their climber. And I mean, they knew it was overkill, but it might be enough to the point where they'd go down to 3 of the Redline A's. You can't, at a certain point, you cannot justify putting more power in. You can't justify the power distribution port slots or whatever it is. And yes, that, I mean, with the Rev with the new with the Neos, with the Redline A's, all this stuff, you're going to be limited by power distribution port slots and like 40 amp slots at a certain point. So maybe teams will start to get more judicious about that aspect of design.
Yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see how teams integrate that. It's from Allen, from a team that considers appearance very highly. How do you feel about the red part of the red line now that it's not actually exactly the same as a 775
Yeah,
Pro?
I mean, if we need the speed, it'll go on the robot. I mean, part of it is also just like for us, it's shipping time and stuff. Like if the
True.
same price of everything's true, we can order from Vex. It's faster to get here, right? If I was in Indiana, I would order a lot more from Andy Mark. If it's the same product, right? But yeah, we can wrap the red. We can figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, speaking from a team that loves red, puts red all over our robots as our branding, I'm sign me up, right? I think one other thing to consider here, though, it kind of falls into the same conversation, is something that Vex Pro announced today, which is that they're offering with the 775 Pro, you can now purchase with the 775 Connect connector reversal and pinions pre-installed. Andy Mark was already offering the red line with the 12-232 DP pinion installed, but that was up until today the only option for getting pre-installed. So how do you think that factors into it for teams?
Yeah, it's a very big deal for teams who are either scared of pressing, don't have the equipment to do it, just don't want to save time, and it also makes it so it's fully COTS. You don't have to worry about it. You can, it's especially if you're just buying it, getting it shipped somewhere. If you're not sure if you need it, but you're shipping it to your hotel for an event, like I think we've all been there at some point. Like it's so much easier that it's ready to go, and you can just throw it on your robot.
Yeah, Evan, you and I were talking earlier today about it, and thinking about it from a lower resource team perspective, you're only paying, I think we figured out it was like $2 extra to get it. Basically, you're paying $2 for the assembly of the whole thing versus buying it separate. And that's like so worth it, in my opinion, for the lower resource teams that don't have things to press items on correctly. To not have to worry about it and just get it so you can try out and get the mechanism going. That just seems like a home run. That to pay two more bucks to get it that way, that's big.
Yeah, I know, coming from a team that's done some sketchy pressing before. We actually purchased Andy Mark's pinion press tool last year. We didn't have any pinions to press on, but we saw it and we're like, that's going to be really useful when we do have to do that. We used pressed on pulleys from West Coast Products in 2017 for our shooter. So I think that it's definitely something that teams are gonna benefit from, and something that I'm pretty excited to see. One thing that we did note in our conversations about the 775 Connect is they've intentionally talked about how the way that they've selected the polarity for the pre-installed option is that if it will match bag motors rotation direction. From my understanding, that means it's opposite of what the 775 would have done if you'd plugged the red wire or soldered the red wire onto what was previously identified as the motor positive side with the little indent or feature on the plastic around that terminal. So just something for teams to keep in mind. We haven't been able to completely confirm that, but we suspect that if you have a 775 from previous seasons that maybe you installed the old 775 connector Aussie boards onto or soldered your own leads onto, and we're using that marker as which side was the red positive terminal, that when you get them pre-installed, it may be opposite of that, but they will match the bags. Yeah. So
I'll definitely say there's a lot of teams who have no idea that the marker exists and they just solder up wires. So for a lot of teams, I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I think to find consistency is just huge, right? Just having Vex come out and say this is what it's going to be. If you need to change and either desolder motors you had last year to make a match, or just make a mental note that anything that it doesn't have a 775 connect on, you don't know what direction it might turn. From today forward, this is the new standard, and so I think it'll be really great for teams.
I'm going to continue to encourage teams to check which direction the motor's spinning before installing everything like a
Sure.
ratchet.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general it's good practice if you're swapping a motor in to take some precautions and verify that it's doing what you expect it to do. Because I mean, look, as much as you can, beat it into the heads that you solder the red lead onto this one, people make mistakes, right? I've done it. Other mentors I've worked with have done it. Students have done it, and so just take the precautions before you smoke something. We also got, we talked about pre-pressed pinions, right? There's some new options that Vex came out with today. And Andy Mark is also now offering the pinion that integrates into their sport gearbox line as a pre-pressed option. So what do you guys think about the new pinions? 20 DP for 775s.
Yeah, so this is actually one of the ones I'm more excited about. Getting the 6 and 8 tooth pinions for 775 Pros, 550s, and bag motors to be able to use those with the 20 DP that we already have. Like we have, if you've been around FRC for long enough, you have a ton of those gears, right? They've been in every gearbox since 2006, 2007, whenever that drivetrain first came out, the one that got to DP gears. So we can use those instead of having to do everything on 32 DP. That's harder. You only have the 3/8 hex bore coming out of those on any of those gears that you have to do. So you're almost always building either a 2-stage gearbox or you're going down to 3/8 hex for whatever your mechanism is. So just being able to swap those in is going to be really convenient for teams.
Yeah, and I think it enables some pretty nifty things now too. We saw, they Vex demonstrated swapping out, reductions. I've heard some people talking about how you can take an existing reduction that you would have in 32 DP gears, and if you change it to a 60 DP with the same center spacing, you get like 25% more overall reduction from it. Did any of you guys, I mean, the opinions look pretty funny. Any of you guys concerned about wear over the season or using these on new applications?
It's the first thing I thought of when I was watching the Vex videos today was it looks like it would be susceptible to wear quickly. It'll be interesting to see over this season the teams that use them. How do they stand up or do they not? And yeah, it's certainly a concern, I would think.
I mean, so yeah, I mean they did post. If you look at the chief post, John Jack was in there talking about the testing they did. They're all steel pinions and they're intentionally the wrong spacing. So that's one thing you want to make sure you're actually figuring that out, right? It's even though it is a 6-tooth 20 DP gear, it's on 8-tooth spacing, and same with the 8 is on 10. So like, you have to know what you're doing when you're figuring out what gearbox you're using and how you're setting that up. And the reason they do that is to make the gear teeth so much bigger. They eliminate all the undercut so that you shouldn't be shearing teeth, and that's really the only big worry with the gears at that point, right? So you're not with the steel gear, you're not going to have a problem when there's no undercut. You have a nice big tooth profile. So almost why they look funny is so that they hold up over the whole season.
Yeah, and I think we've all seen horror stories of pinions on gearboxes, especially in drivetrains, go cracking, and for the vast majority of those, at least that I've seen, they were all aluminum pinions. So having the steel there, extra durability, is a big benefit. And of course, on something that small, the weight difference is pretty much negligible.
Yeah, I think the only aluminum pinion you can buy anymore is the 12-tooth sim, and we stopped running those a while ago. I assume most teams have. So the weight difference is not enough. If you're still running aluminum pinions, I don't know what you're doing. Like,
yeah, ever since 2013 with the size changes, like if you're running up against 120 pounds, you should find your weight elsewhere. Not to carry water for the manufacturers, but almost or most like bad wear that we've seen on recent FRC specific gears has been from really just terrible applications, like misjudging center to center distances and like loose drivetrain motors. I've seen that so many times, it's infuriating.
Yeah, or just being put through more abuse than they really should be. 100 matches into Stronghold. I'm not sure I'd blame any of those pinions for cracking on a drivetrain. But Alan, you also mentioned briefly the the sim pinions. We've got some new options for the Sims style output as well.
Yeah, this is really exciting actually. That's one of my, especially for everybody designing, if you're designing your own custom gearbox, you're designing your own drivetrain. For a while now, we've basically been able to have the 12 and the 11, and you've been able to swap them in and out because they're both on that 12-tooth spacing. But they added the 10-tooth on the same spacing. So now you can build a whole drivetrain and kind of decide between 3 options just by swapping the pinion that's on your motor. So it's a much faster, you don't have to rebuild your whole robot. You take off a motor, swap some pinions. They're the same keyed ones, and it'll all just work the same way. They also released a pressed on 8-tooth on the 10 spacing, correct? Or is it 9-tooth on 10?
It's 9-tooth on 10.
9-tooth on 10,
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're trying to get an even or even a bigger single reduction, you can go ahead and press it on and get a really, really big reduction in one stage.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that one personally. I hope they offer those as a pre-press option like they do for the 775s, because that's something that can be a challenge for teams. But I did some quick math earlier using JVN's design calculator, and you can do a single stage reduction 9 to 84 with mini sims and come out to about a 13.3 single speed on 6-inch wheels. Which is something that just straight up wasn't possible before.
Right.
You could never do a single speed gearbox for 6-inch wheels with only a single stage reduction. Beyond that, right, it also means that if you're going for a more standard reduction, you can just make it smaller.
Right.
So that's pretty exciting. Any Matt, Steve, any other thoughts on some of the new gears that we got to see today?
I was happy, now that we're talking about Sims, I was happy to see that the Sim motor was included in some of the updates. I know that many teams still use Sim motors, and they're great, they're awesome, they're robust. Like, why would a lot of teams say, why would I try anything different, right? And it's nice to see that they included that stuff, so you're not forcing teams to have to now reconsider what they always have done that works well for what they need. So yeah, that was my thoughts on it. It was nice to see that the Sim motor was included in the updates.
I'll be interested to see if, you've got the new hotness. You have several teams in the past couple of years that have run no sims at all. They're like all 775s or whatever. And so they can skip right over to the Rev Neos if they want. Or we might start to see some like old school ARM style things with a sim on an ARM, because I haven't seen anything other than 775s on ARMs in a couple of years. So with the ability to mess with your initial gearing, it's a good thing that they included that, because that might have even more applications in non-drivetrain parts of robots.
Yeah, I mean, on Apex we used 2 sims last year on our main ARM pivot, and we did that because it was less stages of reduction. And we pretty much maxed it out. We used the Andy Mark sims with the 15 to 32 DP pinions pressed on, going to 100 tooth, and then it was like a 14 to 84 and 20 DP and like 12 to 60 and 35. It was like absolutely the maximum reduction you could get in 3 stages of that kind. And it worked fantastic. So yeah, absolutely more options for sims, for mechanisms. I'm always a fan of. We also have some new gearbox options from both Vex and Andy Mark that look pretty exciting, involving the ability to put 2 775 or other style motors into planetaries, and do all kinds of wacky things with how you route that output. Alan, have you had a chance to dig into any of that?
Yeah, so I was digging through what they've released so far, the drawings and everything from today from Vex, and also last week from Andy Mark, where they have the new dual sport gearbox, which I think is definitely a useful update back from. I remember in 2012 using like the simulator when you could put in 2 Fisher-Price motors and do things. So like that's a nice cheap application that you can do the same thing now with actually a nice 3/8 hex shaft. You can put in 2 775 Pros into it, for relatively inexpensive and get a nice gearbox. Or if you're using the sport line, you can go right into it now that you didn't have that option before.
How far we've come.
Yeah. On the Vex side of things, you get the Versa DM, which is finally their improved dual input adapter, which a lot of people had struggles with. We've used them in the past successfully, but they definitely could have improvements, and I think they did a good job of making those improvements happen. It's a full gearbox now. You can use it as an input to a Versa Planetary, but you can also use it as an output to half-inch hex even. So if you just need to get a small reduction, if you have something like a shooter wheel where you only need that 3-point-something to 1 reduction and you can spin it up fine, you can do that way. So it's good that both manufacturers are coming out to get a lot of power into those single applications.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I think what's really cool about the new Vex offerings, they have the plastic and the aluminum versions, slightly different price points, but just the sheer number of options that you have in terms of mounting, in terms of integrating with Versa Planetaries, using them with the universal female output shafts, or just with one of the standard output shaft options, the 8mm, the 3/8 inch hex, where the 1/2 inch hex just makes it cover so many different things in 3 different ratio options too. So it's certainly a versatile option, but maybe on the little bit pricier side. I think a lot of people are maybe balking at the price increase over the old dual inputs. What are your thoughts there?
I understand the complaint about price, but I also remember the days, I'd say it'd be 5, 10 plus years ago, where a lot of our time was spent trying to get these motors to interface with something that we could feel that we had a robust system in place. And it's nice now that you're paying more, yes, but the time you're saving and trying to figure out, how am I going to get this on this wheel, or how am I going to get this in this gearbox, like all of those things now are taken care of, so you can more worry about making a robust actual subsystem that you need to work well, instead of, I got to get this to mount to this thing so then I can get it in the subsystem. You've taken that whole headache completely out of it.
For sure. I'm talking about robust, right? Andy Mark announced some updates to their sport gearbox line, including a whole bunch more gear options. But they also announced that while they are standing behind their product 100%, the guarantee is going away because they're opening up those gearing options. It is now possible to exceed the load rating on some gearboxes. Curious what you guys think about that, both the new offerings and the decision to kind of stop protecting the users from themselves.
I mean,
I can understand it completely. I know in the past that we knew what it was rated for, and we only needed to get a little bit more than what it was rated for. So we decided just to have a backup, so if it failed, we could just replace it quick. So, I mean, I get it. I can understand the balk from people too. But what's really cool about First is you got these really smart people, and they will figure out how to get just to that breaking point. So yeah, I get it completely.
Yeah, I mean, and they are offering the HD stage options now too, with double fates with gears and strengthened carrier plates. So I think they're certainly going to be able to handle the abuse that FRC teams put them through. At the end of the day, right, it is an engineering challenge. You should have to do a little bit of engineering, and if not, then there's a learning experience there. So I think those are just a really solid product. We bought some last year, didn't end up using them because the application that we bought them for, we ended up going a different direction. But they really did seem like pretty nice gearboxes. I don't know if any of you guys used any of the sport gearboxes last year.
We haven't competed with them yet, but all the reviews I've seen from other teams and the few times I've had to like help other teams with them and stuff, they've been great.
Very cool. And sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Well, with all of these gearbox options, like when I joined, yes, we're all doing like back in my day, like there were 2 or 3 drive gearboxes that you could choose from. and that was it. And now, it doesn't mean that you should just go out there and get the gearbox that everybody says you should get. Now you can do your initial like engineering analysis and then pick from a couple of good options rather than okay, we did all that analysis and that doesn't matter because we can't make the gearbox that we want and that gearbox doesn't exist in the market. Now it's which of these gearboxes do we need, and you can come to that with like reasoned conclusion instead of just, I don't know, this is the one that's closest and I don't care what the rating is.
Yeah, along those lines, Steve, it's interesting because it almost forces teams to engineer more because now they have to think about it. You can't just go on a website, click between a couple options and go with the one that you think is right. Like you have to really think about it. Like which thing do I want? Okay, then from there, it forces the kids working with the mentors to talk through it, and if they have a gearbox laying around, to try something, to know that no, it's not that option we want, it's another one. And it was funny that I saw with these announcements today and talking about gearboxes. Now we just had a question in the chat that we were going to bring up, and I guess, sorry, Evan, to temporarily take over hosting duties. I'll throw it to Evan and to Allen because they're guys that have worked with things in these gearboxes, and I'm from a lower resource team that we wouldn't necessarily know this answer. So here we go. The question was from Azeloth, I think I said that correctly. And it said, any thoughts on why Vex went through all the trouble to develop the tooling to create both a plastic housing and an aluminum housing for the Versa DM? Seems like a lot of effort for minimal practical differences. Are there usage cases that would demand each that I'm missing?
I'll take that to start. I love the way the aluminum looks. I mean, there's you do have to say that, some people do care about how it looks, and that can be a draw. So I think that's part of it. I think the fact that one of them is an open gearing option as opposed to enclosed may have some appeal to some teams over the other. I personally really like the plastic options. They do have they look like steel threaded inserts in the plastic gearbox. But I don't know. I don't know if there's a particular case that really it's an absolute performance advantage over. But I can see teams, especially teams that are using, ball shifters, maybe want the plastic housing to go with the plastic ball shifter housing, and teams that are using the West Coast products, dual speed or single speed gearboxes, maybe they want the aluminum housing to go with that. Allen, what are your thoughts?
So the most specific use case I came up with was that if you are using it not as an input to a Versa Planetary, but as its own gearbox, you may actually want the aluminum one if it's going to be seeing more shock loading, if it's going to be doing something where you're actually stressing on that case. The plastic may not hold up. You may be pulling the inserts out. Like, I don't know exactly how you're going to be loading that part, where the aluminum may just be better for that application.
Yeah, I mean, and offering something that to put it a different way, the users may modify to their own liking. I remember when the last year when Andy Mark came out with the Decimate gearbox, and shortly thereafter Vex came out with the 3/8 inch Thunder Hex option. There was the possibility of actually taking parts of a Decimate and creating that gearbox, but with a 3/8 inch Thunder Hex output, just based off of what was available. No machining required. And so, I could see teams kind of taking the metal version, which has the spacing for just 20 DP gear options, and doing something else with it. And so, yeah, I definitely agree that that's something that's going to be a lot easier with the metal plates than maybe with the plastic ones. I don't know if there's a load rating or a specific weight difference between the two of them. It's probably pretty small.
Yeah, they said that I think they posted the plastic one is ever so slightly lighter, but not enough to where I think teams are going to worry about it.
I guess to add one more thing onto it, and I don't know, it doesn't matter so much necessarily with like 775s, but if you're running a bag motor in there, the aluminum one's going to be a much better heat sink if you're driving it really hard, because the bag motor is a sealed motor. So that's something to consider as well. So let's moving on. I think the last thing to talk about with the gearbox options that we kind of want to highlight is the 90-degree versaplanetary block that was revealed as the last item today. Steve, I'm gonna throw this one to you and get your thoughts on how this is gonna show up on robots in the future.
Well, like every application of bevel gears in the past has been a gigantic resource sink for teams. Just the amount of effort to figure out which bevel gears and source bevel gears and then correctly support bevel gears. They're the worst. Bevel gears are like the devil, right? But this gives you the opportunity to, if you don't want to purchase one of the swerve modules, you can do like a simple bevel gear swerve module with something that just does the bevel, which was always a pain. You can also do stuff like multi-side intakes. 195 had one of those in 2014, the Cyber Knights, where it was just 3 rollers, two like this and one like this, and it was just bevel gears. But just bevel gears was never a thing you could do before. Yeah. So now you have the 90 degrees. It allows you to not only do those 2 specific applications, but it also lets you do some interesting packaging things. Sometimes it's just like, we'd love to have our arm be this size so that it can fit within another part of our robot as it swings, but we can't if we have a motor on the wrist. And so now you could do like an inline motor in a wrist without devoting an inordinate amount of resources to doing that.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty useful product. We have had the LJ bevel box and from Andy Mark in the past, but a little bit limited on the input options. Great gearbox there. This is just another thing to slot into the versaplanetary toolbox. Yeah. They did mention that you can put it anywhere in the reduction. I haven't really looked at it. I don't know if any of you guys have, about maybe where it's optimal to place that. If it's really just wherever the packaging works best, or if you kind of want to avoid putting it on one end or the other. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
It looks like it's going to be wherever you want, right? Because you're transmitting all the torque through those same bevels that are very similar to what they've been using in swerves and in other things. They've been selling those for a while. So I don't think it's going to be, that's not going to be the torque limiting spot, right? It doesn't have a tiny sun gear or anything like that. But the really nice thing that I like is they have that, one of the bevels have that female spline in it. So not only do you get a 90-degree output, you can have perpendicular output basically, right? Which is very, very cool. So you can do a CD7 intake or something like that, where you have 2 rollers running in different directions just off that gearbox.
I think that's going to be huge for teams. I think you mentioned it, Steve mentioned it, the ability to do intakes where you've got 90-degree rollers just using this off-the-shelf product is going to be pretty sweet. A little bit on the pricier side, but I think you're getting a lot for what they're offering. And I mean, when you need that, the ability to buy it can be invaluable for a team. So
the first thing I thought of was, there's been many games where we've had to take some sort of game piece, get it in the robot, and then get it up off the ground. And every single game that did that can utilize this. I'm like the basketball year, Rebound Rumble, those were light foam basketballs. We had to get them in and then get them up to wherever the shooter was. And to be able to just have one gear system set up somewhere in that 90 degrees, so that way the entire thing could be run off one subsystem, that would have been huge that year, because we could have dedicated a lot more time to do other things. And I'm thinking the power cubes was another one, right? A lot of teams, they wanted to get it in and get it up, and you would have been able to set up some sort of system to be able to do that 90-degree turn pretty quickly.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Where this fits, it's going to be huge. Before we talk about kind of the big end game here, the new drivetrain options, we're just going to do kind of a brief rundown of some of the other cool miscellaneous stuff that didn't fit into the other categories. Vex today announced that they've got new thinner 050 wall 2x1 VersaFrame. I personally am pretty excited about that as a team that uses a lot of VersaFrame. What are your thoughts, Alan, Steve, Matt, on how this is going to help teams in the coming year?
One of the things I heard was that it's actually pretty hard right now to source 16th wall 2x1 in some international locations, even Canada. So apparently the 50 thou should be pretty helpful for international teams, even though they're still having to order from Vex and doing that. But if you have someplace where you have a Vex supplier, it may be a lot easier.
That's really good to know. Yeah, I think the difference between 050 and 060 is going to be pretty negligible from a strength standpoint. If you're willing to go that thin, you probably aren't on the ragged edge of it not working. But sourcing and having another option, certainly big for teams. Any other thoughts on the 2x1 before I move on? It pretty much speaks for itself. It's box tubing, right?
It's metal. It goes from one place to another.
We haven't talked a lot about Armabot yet, but they've had some pretty nifty new products. One of the ones that maybe hasn't gotten the attention that it deserves is the turret ring that they just came out with. As far as I know, this is the first driven COTS turret option that's ever been available. I think AndyMark had a turret ring a couple years ago upgrade for the Kitbot chassis, but I don't believe it was. I could be wrong, but I don't believe it was actually powered. So that's pretty awesome. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
It was cool to see. I know that in the kit for many years we've had that huge Lazy Susan in it that didn't have any, like, you had to come up with everything else except that part. So it was neat to have an option out there somewhere that some of those headaches that you would have to be able to figure out how to use it are taken from you, and you could just get it so you could move on to something else.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I want to see more of. Like, Armbot doesn't have full product photos or anything or test videos, but it's one I'd want to see more of. They are doing it. It's two belts that are timing belts that are engaging to each other. So it's actually wrapped around the Lazy Susan or the turntable. So there's no reason why it shouldn't work, but just having the product sketch photo, not the real thing, I'm a little hesitant about it.
Yeah, it's worth noting that it is based off of the turret ring that 5818 ran during the Steamworks season for their 3-gear auto robot gear runner. So there's at least a little bit of service history that it's based on. It's pretty big too. I think I don't remember offhand what the internal diameter, but it should be able. I believe they said it would be able to fit the Steamworks Boulder through it, and the price point seems pretty decent at $150. It is, I mean, it's pricey. It's a premium product, but for something that there is no comparison to, it's around the ballpark of what you're paying for a versaplanetary gearbox and the like. So it doesn't seem totally outrageous to me to make that a core part of your robot if you really need that functionality.
Right. Yeah. If you don't have a way to build it yourself, if you don't have the router or laser cutter to make that pulley or ring gear or some other way, there's a bunch of resources that talk about how to make the turret, but that if you can't do that part of it and getting it powered, it's nice that there is a COTS option.
Sure. Some electronics updates. AndyMark released an update to the Pixie Cam, the Pixie 2. That seems like a lot of teams used that a couple years ago to a lot of great success. And we did confirm that the Limelight 2 is coming out. So those are two updated vision options for teams going into this season. We're kind of hinting at there might be some vision challenges in the game this year.
Pixie 2 has been out for a little while, but now AndyMark is a distributor for it, which is really nice. So it's been a tested product, and people have been using it in different applications for a while.
Yeah, a proven product there, both of them really. So definitely excited to get more info on the Limelight 2 as well. And then Armabot has a new LiDAR offering. not a lot of teams have really jumped on the LiDAR bandwagon, but if there's a lot of navigation that's needed, I think that we might see that getting picked up as well. Matt, you had some stuff you wanted to talk about real quick before we end on drivetrains, about some stuff that Andy Mark released this past week.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little shout out to Andy Mark, because from somebody that's led a team for a number of years, I noticed that in the new products list, Andy Mark put out some basic tools for teams, and it's small and most teams just glaze over it, that oh, that's nice, like, type thing. But that would have been a huge benefit to me, because we would have been able to buy that stuff directly from Andy Mark. The amount of work that it takes to get all the paperwork set up, to get POs and payments and all that stuff, to be able to then not have to worry about purchasing those materials elsewhere, that would have been big, because we could just get one big order of those things shipped to us instead of having to find another place to buy those. So it was cool to see those items in the list that were added in.
Yeah, I think for teams who have trouble adding new suppliers or getting reimbursement for items, that's just a huge benefit to have the one-stop shop. So kudos to Andy Mark for recognizing that need and adding in some really neat options. All right, we're here. Drivetrains. We'll start off with the big one. Brand new full drive base option from Andy Mark in the Raptor Drive. Steve, you and Team 190 built tracks in 2016 for a Stronghold, so I'm going to throw it to you to get your thoughts on an update to or a new version maybe of the popular Rhino Drive, even though you guys made your own.
We made our own, and we learned that you need a lot more lathe time than you might expect. There are so many shafts that are needed in treads that buying them makes it a more attractive option. It's good to see that there is an update for irregular terrain drives, whether we need that this year or not. If you're starting from nothing, researching and developing a track drive is an exercise in developing a stationary robot.
Yep, and I think when the original Rhino Drive came out just before 2016, Andy Mark talked about how it'd been in development for a while, that it was kind of developed for non-FRC, and they adapted it for the first robotics rules and sort of typical use case. But one thing that was maybe a little bit overlooked there, or not possible to integrate last minute, was bumpers. And they did come out with a kit for it, but it was certainly not, I think, as ideal as a lot of teams would have liked. And so that's one of the big things that the new Raptor Drive helps with. Is it's much easier to build bumpers for this thing. It does have a lower approach angle, so I think there's still a spot for the old Rhino Drive, but they really hit it out of the park a couple years ago. I think this one's going to be a pretty awesome offering. We'll see when it makes its debut on the competition field. Speaking of hard to get over terrain, though, new hubs for pneumatic tires from Andy Mark for their 8-inch pneumatic wheels, which sold like hotcakes in Stronghold. Matt, you're particularly fond of these. Why don't you talk about those?
Yeah, I'm fond of them because our team ended up purchasing, I think, 2 sets of them, which means we purchased 12 of them that year. It was cool to see. Allen and I were talking about it a few days ago. We neither of us had any issues with the pneumatic, or the plastic hubs, I should say, ended up breaking as long as they were dead axle, and we had the same experience. But it would be nice if that you just have to ram your robot over stuff, and that mentality does work for whatever the challenge is. You might as well have this set in there, because it not only does it look cool, but it will definitely withstand whatever you have to go over. So it was neat. The only thing I could think of that might be a drawback is the added weight, and if that would affect like traction, because a lot of times with pneumatic drivetrain setups, you have the issue of traction when you're turning, your robot wants to bounce its way around. So that was the only drawback I could think of, but it definitely means that you have robust drivetrain wheels with these pneumatics with the metal hubs now.
Yeah, it's exciting to see them in both the hex bore and the bearing bore option. I think when you're at the point where you want the heavier, beefier hub, the plastic's just not an option anymore, weight or not. They do look to be pretty light. There is a bit of a comparison on the market, right? West Coast Products has their 6-inch pneumatic wheel hub, but they also have an adapter for that to allow it to work with 8-inch wheels. A little bit lighter, price point is a little bit higher when you add the adapter on for the West Coast Products hub. So a competitive price point from the Andy Mark offering. It looks really nice. It's made out of their new extrusion. I'm pretty excited to see more products for pneumatic wheels on the market, because when the day comes that we need those again, we all need them again.
Well, I mean, Ty's team 319, 2018, they were running around on pneumatic tires. So
yeah, we started on pneumatics too.
Yeah.
We screwed up our drivetrain wheel spacing and ended up drawing too much current and had to kind of hot swap away from them to with Omnis and Coulsons and whatever we could. But we ran 6-inch pneumatic wheels at the start, and I think 148 did as well, at least in one pair.
And because that cable bump last year until the change was going to be a very big deal.
Yeah. Well, and I think we in particular were worried about making sure that we could get up any ramps that happened to come across. I think we weren't sure how many we would see necessarily, but if they were there, we wanted to be able to get up them, and they turned out to be a little less prevalent and less effective than we didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it at the beginning of the season because we weren't building one. But there's uses for pneumatic tires. I know teams that have run them just every year. Pink Team 233 back in the day used to run them without inner tubes in them just to get the extra push. So more options is always more better. On the polar opposite end of the spectrum, swerve drives. We've got a couple of COTS swerve drive options. Talk about those. I think I'll throw it to Allen and see
Yeah,
what
we can talk about
your
swerve.
thoughts are.
Yeah, I'm definitely not the biggest proponent of swerve in the world. I don't think most teams should be doing it, but I get that it's a fun and interesting task and challenge. So having it where teams can learn about it if they have never got to see one, feel one, see if that's an option, or if it is a game where you really absolutely need to drive sideways, swerve is a good way to do it. So having those COTS options and just more availability for teams that they're not limited based on their manufacturing resources, they can learn about these new things and get excited and see about getting them on their robot is really cool.
And I think the biggest thing, almost every team that tried to do an in-season development of swerve really didn't get to stretch the legs on electrical or programming on it. Just you lose time. There's no way to keep schedule with a swerve drive. But now there is. So jumping to the actual driving around of a swerve drive can do really interesting things with your autonomous modes, because you're no longer dealing with scrub from your skid drive when you're trying to do like long range telemetry. So you can start to develop more of these interesting things with a smaller part of the field, just because turning in place with a swerve drive is fun and wonderful. And that's not the case with basically any other drivetrain. So
well, pneumatic wheels, if you do them wrong, are also fun and wonderful to turn with.
Not wonderful, fun.
Hey, all Omni is pretty fun and wonderful. They're fun.
Yeah, it's great. It is great for fidelity. You drive full speed in one direction, you turn, you have no idea where you are.
That is also true.
Bringing it back to the swerve drives, though, the two options we do have on the market right now are the swerve drive specialties, which is a version of the swerve drive that Jack and the Bot 2910 from the Pacific Northwest debuted last year and took all the way to Einstein finals. Absolutely beautiful design, well thought out, and extremely robust. It's really hard to see any design that's been through the paces like a district team that took it to Einstein finals. So a pretty awesome product from them, filling kind of a hole in the market that may have been left when the Revolution Pro went off the market. 221 Systems kind of closed up selling that. And the other is the differential swerve drive from Armabot, which has been talked about and rumored for a couple of seasons. And I don't think anybody's actually run a differential swerve in competition yet, but we already have one as a COTS option. So if you want to skip all of that mechanical development and just buy this thing and try and program it, well, there you go. So pretty interesting to see those two. I expect those will generate interest from teams that are have their eyes towards a swerve drive for the season, and especially for teams that maybe have the programming prowess to pull something like that off, but not the manufacturing capabilities. And then we got a couple other updates to some basic wheels from Andy Mark on their updates to the wheel hubs, grip wheels, and some smooth high grip wheels. So that's pretty interesting. What some real quick thoughts on that from around the horn here?
I mean, these are kind of the wheels that everyone thinks of. You just think of a first wheel, right? They're kind of back in the day we had the Skyway wheelchair wheels, and they're kind of based on that same design idea that we've used to have to use for everything, drivetrain, shooter, everything, because that was the wheel you had. But now we have this wheel that you can still use for your drivetrain or possibly a shooter. Now that you have that smooth high grip and different durometers, so it's just another thing to play with as you're prototyping, another option that you have to get your robot exactly the way that you want it to.
For sure, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Evan. It's interesting to see where these wheels will now go too, because now you think the opposite of, instead of the wheels that we talked about earlier, maybe going somewhere else. Now you're thinking about wheels that typically used for drive. Will they be integrated elsewhere? Like they might be strong enough to withstand high speed shooter stuff now. Like we don't know that. But it allows that capability that you can try it. Like what Alan said, you can give it a try and see what it does, because it might do it for you. And if it does, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, teams have used these on shooters before, just the old ones, but now you just have different durometers for them, which is really nice.
Right.
Yeah, the different durometers is pretty nice. I think the natural comparison for these as an all-around wheel are the Coulsons, and different use case or similar use case, different product, but just having the multiple durometer options is something that we don't get with the Coulsons, and on a wheel hub really bonded to the hub that's seen so much use over the seasons on countless number of kit bots. Is a really neat product to have now.
Well, and you don't have the high grip, the checkerboard problem of really tearing up foam whatever's you're running. Just if it's a game object that can get destroyed, the sharp corners when you start out with those, and even later as they wear down a bit, you need a smooth surface at some point. So having options there, always a benefit.
Options are good for sure. Those high grip wheels and the Skyways that came before them were the shooter wheels of choice for many teams, and back in the day for every team. I think that they're going to see a lot of uses off of drivetrains. One last drivetrain option to talk about, though, Andy Mark's Magic Sprocket, the 17-tooth double number 25 chain sprocket, a pretty specific use case here. Do you think we're gonna see widespread adoption, or is this really marketed just towards a couple of or a handful of specific teams that know what they want and this is it?
I think you are going to see, we've had a lot of teams with interest in chain and tube, and it was just tricky to do before, right? You had the 221 option for a while, but it wasn't hex bore for a while at some point. So you were doing different things to try to make it work, where now you have this option that a lot of teams have been doing. It's kind of bulletproof, and they've been making it work. So if you can get to that point, it's a great option for those teams.
We have in our stockpile of sprockets this horrifying thing from like early Ken Stafford that is a 3-stack of 2 different size sprockets brazed together with bushings pushed into it, and but I'm making the point that that was what you had to be able to do to
Right.
run these chain and
Mhm.
sprocket things. Just even with the 221, like you're just trying to adapt these things. You're adding sleeves and bores, and you're like broaching these things yourself when you've already screwed up whether the teeth are in line and whatever else. So a jump to chain and tube is now possible, where before it was your own development.
Yeah, I think we may see a number of teams kind of jumping on the chain and tube bandwagon with maybe the last piece falling in place with this. Again, used to be offered by 221. They moved on to other things. They haven't announced what they're doing yet, but they are apparently still around. But they've released this product to the wild, and Andy Mark kind of picked it up, adapted it a little bit. I am curious to see if this gets used outside the drivetrain for teams running, chains up, inside intake arms and things, doing fun stuff with that, or if it's really just relegated to the drivetrain realm. But either way, it's a product that I think we're happy to have on the market. So we've talked a lot about all the products. We've talked a lot about the drivetrain options. There's some eerie similarities to the drivetrain options that were released ahead of the 2016 season, and some eerie similarities in what's been announced about Destination Deep Space so far. So real quick before we end, do you guys think it's a sign? Are we in for heavy terrain and more pneumatic tires and tracks, or is it all just a hand wave and smoke and mirrors?
Well, I'm always one for speculation, as the people at RSN know pretty well. I say 100%. There's reason to believe that there's some things going on that we can add together. So yeah, my guess is I add together some things. Like I noticed on the blog where they revealed what you can buy for the field, and for what they have on the list, you have things like a lot of plywood, you have a lot of 2x4s, and I think I added it all together. It was something like 1,200 drywall screws that they wanted you to get for a half field, and it combined that with the idea that you have Andy Mark coming out with the Rhino drive and stronger pneumatic tires, and Vex is putting things out there. What was neat about their product launch was a lot of it was everything is getting more compact and lighter, which was cool to see. And then Rev comes out with the Neo, which is a smaller version of a motor. So my mind, because as Alan knows, Evan, you might have been around for First Frenzy. I don't know. Steve might have been too, but my mind went immediately to First Frenzy, and I think we got a video of it running around. Where you have this massive platform, and all I can think of when I saw lots of plywood and 2x4s is some sort of stepped raised surface that you would have to get your robot up on. I found this video of when in 2004 I was on 340 and we had this tri-wheel idea to get ourselves up those 2 steps, and the amount of engineering to get that to work was unbelievable. But anyway, that's all I can think of is it's some sort of raised platform surface, whether it's a bunch of stairs put together that you have to get up, or whether it's a couple platforms like what you see in First Frenzy. My signs point to, I think we got to go with a smaller robot because of the way that the smaller product releases have come out, and you have to be able to get up some sort of massive structure, whatever that structure is. So I don't know. That's where my mind goes. I'm one for coming up with crazy ideas. So there you go. That's what I got.
I have long advocated for, and I will take a hotter take. I have long advocated for us just to play old games. Just 2019, it's 2004. We changed like 4 of the rules, but it's the field. Like now there are 6 robots on it. Who cares? Show me, because the difference between a 2019 robot, whatever it is, and a 2004 robot is astronomical.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just the motors that are available, the power, just everything. The game wouldn't look the same. I mean, it's a terrible idea, but I would do it.
2004 is a hard one. If we're replaying anything, I want triple play back. I want 2005 if we're playing the game again.
God.
But 04, oh my goodness! Like you already had crazy engineering in 04 to begin with the amount of motor power we have now, where you just have robots who are already hanging on the bar plus capping balls.
Yeah.
It would be insane.
I want 6 robots on the bar and autonomous. Let's do
Oh boy.
Ooh. Those of you
Well,
who don't know,
y'all are-
everyone who on 190 back then just cringed hard. But
I wasn't even on the team back then. That's my favorite robot of all time. But good lord, that's at the speeds that we're going nowadays. That's not gonna be pretty. Oh man, I'm trying to find it. I haven't been able to find it, but I do remember that when first released, some little description of the game of what deep space would entail. That part of it included challenging terrain. I think you add that up, as Matt said, with just the massive amount of wood and wood screws that the field is going to require. That first is released, and then if it was just the product launch alone, I might not think this, but if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's starting to feel like we're gonna have some stuff to get over this year.
I'm hoping that it's not a 2016, right? 2016 is about the only one we've ever had that was that bad on robots, where you had everyone was driving on top of each other. Like ideally, we're not into that point. But if it's back to a 2012 where you have a bump, where you have a ramp, you have something that's you can navigate, you can figure it out.
I could see something like 2012 or 2010 with those massive bumps in the middle of the field. Where it's not all terrain all the time, but there's some obstacles that you got to get over. So I guess we'll find out in less than a month. I definitely want to say thank you to everyone who's been on the show and in the chat tonight. Special thanks to Allen for joining us. As we go out, we're just going to do a quick around the horn. Everybody's favorite new product for coming into 2019. Let's start with Steve, then Allen, then Matt, and I'll go last here.
I'm gonna go back to that bevel thing, the bevel devil, because it looks like a very nice small product to solve a problem that was gigantic.
I'm gonna go with the 10-tooth sim pinion. I really like the options it gives you in the drivetrain. It lets you kind of design to push the edge a little bit. You can design for 12 and be really fast, and then you can reel it back in if you want to, without a lot of work.
I got to go back to the pneumatic wheels. It just brings me back to my high school days where every robot or most robots had pneumatic wheels. It's cool to see that option is now available to make a really robust drivetrain quickly with those things.
Awesome. Well, I had a really hard time deciding, but as a team that builds the vast majority of our robot out of VersaFrame, the new 50,000 2x1 VersaFrame is my pick. It's not exciting, but I know that we'll use it. So with that, we're going to close out the show tonight. Again, thanks to everybody for joining us, and we will talk to you next time, probably after we find out if we're right or not about what Destination Deep Space entails. For all of RSN, Francis, Steve, Matt, and our guest Allen, good night, and we'll talk to you later.